Today we have the joy of ordaining 3 new deacons. At this church, we ordain deacons regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, or any other distinction. We believe this best follows the example set down in Scripture of the radical inclusivity of the early church and of Jesus. And deacons here at this church do not run things. They don't set budgets or make hiring decisions. Members do that together. Instead, deacons pray for the community, provide a dish in times of need, drive people to the doctor, bind the community together. In doing so, our deacons follow the best traditions laid down in our scriptures today. First of all, in Acts 6, where some were called to provide acts of service to the community. The early church in Acts 6, lost my place there. The early church in Acts 6 called 7 people to a ministry of service. The issue was that food was not being fairly distributed, so they set aside 7 people who would make sure that all in the community, and not just some, were well cared for. And these 7 were called to distribute the food fairly, to provide small acts of love, to serve all. And yes, all 7 of them were men, but they were also, based on the names, Greek men. And the point of that story was that the gospel moves outsiders, like the Greeks, to the center of the community, and not that women should be forever placed at the edges. So Acts 6 is one example for our deacons today. Another example is Phoebe. According to Romans 16, Phoebe is a sister or a fellow Christian. She is a benefactor of many, likely a wealthy woman who ran her own household and had freedom to travel. And she is a deacon of the church. The Greek word diakonos means one who serves. And it is the origin of our word deacon. It can be translated as servant, or it can be translated as deacon. And unfortunately, in this case, because it refers to a woman, a lot of male translators of the Bible have just assumed it must have meant servant here, and not deacon. Sometimes they would be generous and translate it as deaconess, a sort of second-class status. But I don't think any of this gives a full accounting of her importance. I believe she was a deacon in all senses of the word. For one, she was quite likely the person who carried the letter to the Romans, Paul's theological masterpiece. She may have had a hand in shaping it. She certainly would have been the one to interpret it to the churches upon her arrival, to answer questions about it, to explain its deeper meanings. And in the 16th chapter of Romans, Paul runs through a litany of names: men and women, Jews and Greeks, slaves and free persons, wealthy households and lowly laborers. And we didn't read all of them today because I knew whoever got stuck reading it would want to hurt me if they had to read the entire chapter worth of names. But Phoebe is listed first of all of those names. She was listed first because it was her job to convey Paul's greeting to all the other people in that list. It was her job to go to all the tiny, remote house churches of Rome and bind them slowly together, to make connections, to carry messages from one place to another, to extend Christ's love. So here we have another role for deacons, not only serving, but also connecting. Not just caring for community, but making community. And at the church at Ponce and Highland, our deacons follow the service tradition of Acts 6, and they also follow the binding tradition of Phoebe, who connected people and created belonging. It is past cliche at this point to talk about how divided we are in this world. One glance at the headlines or your uncle's Facebook page will tell you how divided we are. But we are also in a time of great disconnection. So the technology that helps with quick communication has failed to produce a quality of connection. It steals our attention, it sparks our outrage, it rewards snap judgments and wild claims, and it is constantly steering us away from kindness and patience and prudence and peace, away from each other. We communicate more, I find, but we also find even new ways to form groups and cliques and be cruel to each other. Ask a teenager about Instagram or Snapchat. We are disconnected from each other. And that disconnection, that lack of knowing we are human and in it together, that disconnection leads to division, and that division leads to disaster. And the division and the disaster for all of us get so much that what do we want to do? We just want to disconnect and back away. When life isn't going our way, when we're depressed or anxious or struggling with an addiction, when we're having trouble at work or trouble at home, when we're worried about the future or the world just seems like too much, our tendency is to retreat, to withdraw from other people and the binds that connect us. And perhaps we do it out of fear, perhaps out of shame, perhaps because other people can be difficult, but we withdraw. We disconnect ourselves further, and if we do it to protect ourselves, that's fine, but it leaves us worse off than before. Because connection and belonging, that's the stuff of life. We are not made to be alone. So instead, we must, as a community and as individuals, practice intentional connection. When you notice that instinct to pull away, when the disconnection makes you want to be more disconnected, notice it and do the opposite. Make that the moment when you call the old friend who you haven't talked to in too long, or better yet, go meet up in person. Think of something kind that you could do for a stranger, a neighbor, a family member, even if, maybe especially if, you're divided by politics or the heat of the moment. Because actions speak louder than words, right? And small acts of service can do more to bind us together than a speech about how much you care about someone. And someone may not reciprocate that act, but that's not what matters. What matters is you reaching out for connection, because here's the thing. We don't help ourselves when we make division worse. People who thrive on chaos and division always win when chaos and division is all there is. We can't beat division by disconnecting and cutting people off. When someone's encouraging you to turn on other people, that is when we need to be turning to other people. We need to carefully cultivate connection and belonging, to give ourselves strength and hope, to remind everyone, including ourselves, about our common humanity. Within the church, this is part of the holy ministry of deacons, to serve and to bind. There are too many churches where everyone knows the preacher, but no one knows each other, where all the relationships go in and out like spokes on a wheel. But a place of true belonging, a true tapestry woven together of many threads, the kind of community of mutual support that can transform people and sees them through the darkest hour. For that, you need people to be connected to each other. So, at our church, we write down everyone who is actively involved, and we divvy them up. And every deacon gets a list of people, and that list is their group of people to connect with and to care for. And unless it's your first or your second time here, chances are you have a deacon assigned to you. It's the nice thing about being part of a small church community. Your deacon's job will be to ask how you are doing, to pray for you, to help out if you need it, to be your Instagram hype squad, liking every single thing that you post. That is part of the job description. To do acts of service, like in Acts 6. To bind the community together, like Phoebe did. And I'll let you in on a little secret. There's a lot more people on the deacon list this year than there were this time last year. And it's only February. This community is growing fast. People are seeking out an inclusive gospel of Jesus Christ. So when we ordain people in a second, as we bless their ministry, let's take it as a call to aid their ministry. Don't just leave it to the deacons. Let's all commit ourselves to building community and connection and belonging. And maybe that means worshiping in person just one more Sunday a month. Or finally showing up for that thing you've been thinking about going to, but never quite got out of bed in time. Maybe you meet up with somebody from church, outside of church, or just introduce yourself to somebody new. Aid this ministry of connection. We have this tendency to think that the greatest shadows in life can only be overcome with the most powerful, piercing, blinding, single light. And some of you might be looking around for that kind of light this Sunday. But we would err if we forgot the power of many lights, of the small inner lights, of countless people doing small acts of love. It is through such many lights that the love of God pours forth into this world. This past week, I was here at church in my office when I heard some shouting outside on the street, which is not actually that unusual of an occurrence, so I didn't think much of it at first. But it continued, so I got up and looked out the window, and I saw somebody marching off with our pride flag and shouting about it. Now, in this case, this person appeared to be in the middle of a mental health episode. We can buy a new flag. This is not worth fighting over with somebody, right? The flag goes missing from time to time, we replace it. But a few minutes later, in this case, the doorbell rang. And there at the door was a beloved child of God who is not part of our community, but a beloved child of God who had seen this flag earlier, and it had meant something to them that it was hanging outside a church. And so when they saw someone carrying it off, going down the street, shouting about how it didn't deserve to be in front of a church, didn't accord with their view of Scripture, this lovely human being followed along, and when our thief tossed it in the street, they picked it up and brought it back. This was a small gesture. It would not have broken our budget to replace the flag, even the flagpole, which is actually far more expensive than the flag. And we all know that returning it is not going to do away with homophobia or the attempts by our government to construct a Jim Crow for trans people. Our problems don't magically disappear when we do these small things, but it is what one person can do in one moment, one small act of service that brings just a little bit more love and human connection into this world. And it reminds us that our task in this moment and every moment is to bind the many lights together, to be the light of Christ together. A light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overtake it. So today we have the honor of ordaining 3 new deacons. We are calling them to the ministry of love, to a ministry of small acts of service that drive out darkness, to a ministry of binding people together so that all might know the wild, inclusive love of God. In the mold of the first 7 called by the church, in the mold of Phoebe.